Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the 9th and final round of the 1000 GM 6-day summer invitational tournament being held in New York City. Now, Levy has been playing great throughout the event. He has 7 points out of 8, and in the final round he's playing both the lowest rated player and the lowest performing player in the tournament, Rozman Vikram. Now, Levy having secured first place already, the main thing to do is take care of business and win this final game against the weakest player. So let's jump right into the action. The game starts with the move e4. We get this move c6 from Levy. We have d4, d5, and now the move e5, which is the advanced variation of the Caro-Kann. Here, Levy plays the move c5. Early in the tournament, you may recall that Levy put his bishop on f5, which is considered the main line, but c5 is a slight alternative. And additionally, I think when you're playing against the lowest rated player in the tournament, it's a good surprise weapon because it tends to create opportunities for much more imbalanced positions, which should be good against someone who's weaker. So we get c5. D takes c5 is played by Rozman. We get the move e6 here, trying to develop the bishop and capture the pawn. Now here we have this move knight f3 being played. Now it's already a very critical moment in the game because white could try to play bishop e3 to develop the bishop and defend some pawns early, but Rozman instead decides to play the move knight f3. We get the move bishop takes c5. We have the move bishop d3 being played, and now Levy goes knight e7. Now one of the great things about Levy's opening here is it's very easy and simple development. You bring the bishop out, bring the knight out. You want to bring this knight out and castle the king, and there really isn't a whole lot to think about. So we get castles. Levy goes knight c6. We get c3, and now he plays the move knight g6, trying to pressure this pawn on e5. Rozman goes queen e2, and now we get the move queen to c7, and rook e1 is played to guard the pawn. At this point, Levy now decides to castle his king out of the center of the board, and at this point, we've reached the middle game. Now, one thing that I have noticed about Levy's opponents is they seem to have a fairly good grasp of what the first 9-10 moves should be, but as soon as they're not in something that they've reviewed at home, that they know by heart, they very quickly seem to be going astray. And this is another example where Levy's opponent makes a fairly serious mistake here by playing this move pawn to h4. In this position, what white should do is play the move b4, attacking the bishop, which is on this very nice long diagonal. And after bishop b6, if white goes a4 here, trying to play for a trap with a5, meaning the bishop has no squares available, white would be winning. And if black goes a6 here, white can now trade the bishop for the knight. Black recaptures to open the f file, and after bishop to e3 is played, white is simply quite a bit better here because after the bishops come off, bishop d7 and knight bd2 is played. White intends to go knight b3 and knight to d4 and get a massive grip on the central squares. So very easy for me to see this as a 2700 GM, is certainly obviously having access to an engine doesn't hurt, but during the game it's very clear that Levy's opponent wants to try and tunnel on a plan, and instead he plays the move h4. Now this move would be great if not for one big issue here, which is that after h4, black can now play the move f6 to open up this f file. If Levy does not have f6 here, let's say he goes bishop d7, after h5, knight ge7, and h6, g6, for example, and b4, white is doing very, very well here. Let's say bishop b6 and bishop g5, all kinds of dark square weaknesses around the black king here, maybe eventually even a lolly checkmate with queen f6 and queen to g7. So after h4, Levy correctly plays f6, challenging white's center here, and now we get the move pawn takes pawn. Levy plays the move g takes f6 after a bit of a think, and this is in fact the correct computer move. Now, one of the great things for Levy is that since he has done some courses on the Caro-Kann and he has a lot of experience in the opening, he has seen this move being played before. I think that if Levy were coming into this game and he had no idea that g takes f6 were a move, almost certainly he would take with the rook to try and keep the f file open. But when you study a lot of different pawn structures and openings in general, sometimes you can sense where you're supposed to do something a little bit different. And a few people mention this, but apparently in one of Levy's courses, I think on Chessable, if I'm not mistaken, after g takes, or not after g takes f6, sorry, but in one of Levy's courses, he did have a line which did involve this capture with the pawn instead of taking with a rook. So after g takes f6, we get bishop to e3. Now we have bishop takes bishop, queen takes bishop, and Levy plays the move e5, building the big black center. At this point, Levy has everything you could ask for and more. In this position, he's going to develop the bishop, bring the rooks to the center, perfect harmony. Also, white can't really challenge the center very easily. So we get the move bishop takes knight. Levy captures, and now we have the move knight b2 being played. You might be wondering why not queen to d3, hitting both of the pawns at the same time. But after queen to d3 and queen to f7, black is simply much better. So we get knight bd2, and now Levy plays the move bishop e6. Now this is in fact a very serious mistake, but it's a move that's very natural and human looking, and frankly playing against someone at the level of Levy's opponent, it probably shouldn't harm him. Now Levy were playing at 2500 GM, there's no doubt they would spot the tactic with knight to d4, attacking the bishop here. If black trades and goes e4, for example, after rook c1, let's say queen d7, and now queen g3, suddenly white is attacking on both the king side and the open c file at the same time. And if you go queen d6, white can go rook c5, followed by rook e to c1, and white is doing very well. But Levy's opponent is 2060. Probably his opponent thought knight d4, bishop f7, takes, and what's the big deal? Now in this position, white can go queen to h6, pressuring the pawn on g6, and after bishop to e8 and a move like b4, queen g7, takes, and knight b3, white is getting a nice bastion for the knight on c5, and even though there's a big black center, white is very marginally worse, if not equal in the position. So after bishop e6, we get the move knight b3 being played instead. Levy plays rook f e8, protecting the bishop. Now knight to d4 is no longer a threat. We have rook a d1 played. Levy goes rook a d8. Now, a fun fact about this position is that if you could magically transport this pawn on h4 back to h3, black would still be a little bit better, but he wouldn't be much better, as you can see from the engine evaluation. Whereas this pawn on h4 is now simply on a bad square, as it gives black access to g4. So we get the move rook d2. We have this move b6 being played by Levy, just a thematic move to stop white from bringing the knight to c5 or d4. We have the move g3 being played, and now Levy goes king g7. A very practical move, stops white from ever playing queen h6, and at this point, white is simply in a lot of trouble because you cannot challenge the big black center. So we get the move rook d to e2, and now Levy plays bishop g4, another very nice move, taking advantage of this pin, and white has to go back to d2 with the rook. After rook d2 is played, Levy plays the move d4, exploding the center of the board and trying to take advantage of these white pawns having been pushed and potentially a weak back rank. So we got pawn takes pawn, and now we have queen d3 being played. Levy trades the rooks on e1, and now he goes queen to e7, pressuring this knight. In this position, we get to move queen to f1 here, guarding the horse on e1. To point this out, or to be very clear, this is the only move in the position. If white were to move the knight to c2, it's knight e5 and knight f3. Spaghetti time with forks. Knight g2 would be the same thing, knight e5 with knight f3 next turn to win the rook. And last but not least, if white were to play, what's the other move? Knight to f3, which is the most natural looking human move. There's knight to b4, attacking the queen. The rook guards the pawn here, queen guards the knight, and white simply is going to drop either the queen or the knight. So if you don't move the queen, you lose it. And if you move the queen, I take on f3, and now the knight on b4 is guarded by the queen on e7. So it's simply GG, why not? So Levy's opponent finds the only move here, which is queen to f1, guarding the horse, and now Levy plays the move rook to e8. Now you'll probably notice computer does not think this is the best move in the position, but at this level, I would say at this level of a game, simply a 2000 player is not going to be able to find the best moves, especially when you feel like you're under a lot of pressure and you're getting attacked by a player who is simply superior. So what white should have played here is the move f3, attacking the bishop. It's a very weakening kind of move on the king side, but it actually works if black trades the queens here. After king f2, you attack the rook and the bishop, and after rook b1, fg4, the pawn on d4 is very weak, and this is an endgame which white should draw. And if black were to play a move like bishop to f5, for example, now white can put the horse on g2, and after a move like d3, for example, there's g4, attacking the bishop here, and if you yield, white can simply take the pawn on d3. And if you try to play a move like rook d8, for example, white can go g4, bishop c8, and queen to f2. And if you go d3 here, now there are moves like queen to e3, knight guards the queen, knight f4 is coming. And even though you'll notice from the evaluation bar that black is better, there are very good practical chances for white. But instead, we get the move knight to d3. After knight to d3 is played here, we now get the move queen to e4 from Levy. This is, again, not a super precise move, but it is good enough because in this position there is literally one move after which white is not losing. Everything else, white will lose the game. Now the move in question is this move rook c2. Now I thought when I was doing my live commentary of this game on my Kick channel that rook c2 could be an accidental brilliant move by Levy's opponent because you attack the knight on c6, but more importantly you try to move the knight to d2, and if you can get these knights on d2 and e2 here, white is only very slightly worse. So I thought maybe you would accidentally blunder this and think like, okay, I attack the knight, I have knight d2, and then Levy would play a move like bishop e2, and he would actually spot that after queen to c1, takes. Black is only very slightly better here because white is now infiltrating on the c file. There might be an idea of queen h6 as well down the road, and you have a weak pawn on d4. But for Levy's opponent, Rozman, he actually spent some time here. When you start spending time, you're never going to play this move rook c2 because you're going to spot bishop e2 or bishop f5, and you're going to think that you're simply losing the game. So after a bit of a think, white plays the move knight b4. Now this is a double question mark, a blunder which loses the game in a sense, but in a way it's the best kind of blunder you can make because black only has one path to be better, let alone win the game. And if black does not find that path, if Levy misses it, he will not win this game. Most likely it'll be a draw. So after knight b4, the obvious thought is, well, why not take the horse? But if you take the horse, there's rook takes pawn, attacking the queen, the knight, and the bishop all at the same time. It's a kebab on the fourth ring. And after you go queen to f3 here, white does not take the horse here because then you have bishop to h3, followed by rook e1 or queen g2 mate with the lolly. But you go rook f4 first, pawn supports the rook, and again, you're attacking the queen, the bishop, and the horse all at the same time. And when black moves the queen, you take the bishop, and after knight c6, let's just say rook f4, for example, white has an extra pawn on the king side, and apparently white's still worse here according to the computer, but white probably doesn't lose this game. But Levy uses his time here. One thing that I've stressed throughout the event is Levy has been very good at his time usage here. And in this case, he uses 13 minutes and he does find the path to victory. He plays this move knight to e5, threatening to fork the king and the rook. White must take the pawn to stop the horse from jumping here. But now he spots the winning move, which is bishop to h3, sacrificing the bishop in this position. Now, white can move the queen away, but if you move the queen away, we get the classic lobster pincer checkmate with queen g2, and white resigns the game. If white takes the bishop on h3, which would have been the best move, there's queen to e1, checking the king, but also winning the rook on d2. And after king g2 takes, knight c6 and queen b2, black is simply up a rook here for a horse and should be winning. But as I was doing my commentary, I could tell that Levy's opponent thought that he had tricked Levy. And in this position, he plays this move f3 with some confidence, thinking that if black goes queen e3, there's queen f2 blocking the check, but the queen now guards the rook, and suddenly, as you can tell from the eval bar, white is up a pawn and probably winning the game. But Levy most likely had calculated the sequence when he played knight e5 to begin with, and he spots the winning blow here, which is knight takes pawn on f3, sacking the horse to check the king. Now, if white could take with a knight here, white would be okay, but if you take with a horse, you lose the queen on f1. So white has to take with the queen here, and again, queen to e1, checks the king, and wins the rook on d2. We get king h2, queen takes d2, king h3, and now Levy plays the move queen takes d4. At this point, Rozman could have resigned, but obviously he wants to keep the game going, probably out of inertia more than anything else. So we get knight to d5, and now Levy goes g5 here, trying to open up the king side and weaken the white king on h3. After g5, we get h5 played, and now Levy again finds the absolute best way to finish the game immediately with this move g4. I believe this is correct if I don't have it wrong. So we get g4 here, checking the king and the queen at the same time. Now, this is a great move from Levy by sacrificing the pawn, because what it does here is you're giving up a pawn, but after queen takes, and rook to e2 here. At this point, white is simply getting cooked. You have a kebab on the second rank. The pawns on b2 and a2 are very weak, and white simply doesn't have any pressure on the king side. So after rook to e2, the game continues with b4. Levy plays rook e4. Rook takes a2 also is good enough with king f5 and a5, for example, but it doesn't really matter. So we get b4. Levy plays the move rook to e4. We get the move king to f3 here. Important, by the way, that if king f5 is played, there's rook to e5, which wins the horse on the d5 square. So we get the move king to f3 being played. After king to f3, we have the move rook to d4, attacking the knight and the pawn at the same time. We get h6, king takes h6, knight takes f6, rook takes b4, and after g4 and rook a4 is played, Levy's opponent Rozman resigns this game. Now, with this game, Levy finishes the tournament with 8 points out of 9. He gains something like 20 points. A very good result from Levy from start to finish. I shouldn't say start to finish, probably round 4 onwards. Nonetheless, in the first few games when he struggled but was able to hold it together, that really solidified his standing in the tournament, and he was able to play, I would say, the last 4 or 5 games at the level that he is capable of. So he gains 20 points in the tournament. He wins it, obviously, with 8 points out of 9. But most importantly, he gains quite a bit of confidence. Now, the confidence is something that Levy should be able to use as he moves forward. I would caution, as a general point, though, for people who are wondering, farming is good in 1 or 2 turns to build the confidence, but Levy should try to avoid too many of these events, because sooner or later he's going to have a slip up in one game. But even beyond having a slip up in a game and ruining a turn where you hurt your elo, ultimately you start to pick up bad habits if you play too many people who are lower rated than you, especially when you're trying to reach higher highs and get to a specific title. So very good to do this once or twice, but I do hope Levy does start focusing more on the norm turns again, because if he does too many of these turns, he's going to pick up some bad habits from doing certain things to beat 2200s, and then he's going to end up doing the same things against the 2500s, and it might cost him a norm in a turn. Nonetheless, great performance. Really nothing that I can say negative about this event for Levy. He plays very well when it counts, he gains a bunch of points, and he builds his confidence. So it's a great result, and we'll see what Levy does in his next over the board tournament. So on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap from the 9th and final round of the 1000 GM 6-day summer invitational tournament being held in New York. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we will be back soon with some more great recaps. I'm going to be playing the Champions Chess Tour pretty soon as well, so look forward to a lot more content. But I hope you guys have enjoyed these recaps from the tournament, and I'll see you all very soon. Have a great one. Bye.